Arkansas is kind of that same way. So if we're looking at Arkansas tax sales and how they work, Arkansas is a tax deed state. So what that means is that every county in the state holds a tax deed auction once a year, and they basically will sell off any of the properties that have gone past the redemption period. So once the redemption period has expired in Arkansas, properties are eligible to be foreclosed on and offered up for auction for the past taxes, the past due taxes that are owed. And so I think in Arkansas, I think that's the 3-year period I want to say is the time period that basically the property owners have to wait before they again lose their property to foreclosure. But once that happens, properties can be foreclosed on and offered up through the tax deed auctions. And so there are other tax deed states out there. That doesn't necessarily make Arkansas unique. One thing that does make Arkansas unique, though, is the fact that they have a central office called the Commissioner of State Lands that oversees the auction for all of the state of Arkansas and basically conducts every one of their tax sales. And they also have a website where we can obtain any of the tax sale lists that they're going to use or review their over-the-counter inventory. It's all done from one site, which is the Commissioner of State Lands website, or cosl.org.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Arkansas is like a lot of tax deed states where they're going to use the premium bid method, meaning it's going to start at the back taxes and it's going to bid up in price, and whoever's the high bidder wins the property. Now, one thing to remember is that all of Arkansas, their yearly auctions that Shay just talked about, are going to be on-site only. So you need to attend the event there in person. Now, what happens is any property that isn't sold there at the on-site auction is then put in their online auction system through the Commissioner of State Lands. And so what happens is 30 days after the auction, then they'll go ahead and list all of those properties on their website. Now, those properties will sit on their website until somebody makes the minimum bid amount. And then what happens is there's a 30-day online auction. So if you wanted to purchase the properties at the yearly sale, you're going to need to attend in person. If you'd like to participate in the over-the-counter property, you can do that online.
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over here and we're going to look at some properties here. Give me just a second here, Steve. I'm going to make you the presenter here.
Sounds good. Okay. There we go. Took me a minute to get that worked out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at some past sales from last year. Now, I probably could have picked a better county. I probably should have. Arkansas is a pretty small county. It was just the very first one on the list. We can go back there and choose any of the counties and look what the past sales are. But, I just started with Arkansas. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the properties here in Arkansas County, Arkansas. And then we're going to go look at some properties that we sold as well. So the first property we're going to look at is this very first one right here. You can see sold for $32,000. There's the property right there. Here we can see some of the county record information. This is where we can see that it's sold through the Commissioner of State Lands. We can look at the improvement information. It says it was 35 years old. And then they've got it valued here on Redfin at $108,000. Now, one thing that I kind of found interesting as I started looking into it is what some of the other properties in the area have sold for, because we can see that we're missing some information here. And this is one of the cheaper properties that I could find that sold pretty close to it, and it sold for $120,000. But we can kind of see that it's in need of a full rehab.
Yeah, which that actually makes it kind of it's a better comp because it's in need of a rehab.
Yeah, exactly. If you start, here's, kind of another one very similar. In fact, I think that these guys may have had a carport here that, it kind of looks like to me that maybe they boarded up the carport Yeah, you can see that it's already kind of partly done there.
What was the purchase price on this one?
This one sold for 143,000, and
Oh,
it's been
from
up.
oh, I mean from the tax sale.
This one's ended up selling for 32,000. So this is kind of the one that they bid up more than any of these others on the list. But I think it's because people were kind of interested in here in this market and within this area. Here's one that's about the same size. That sold for 184 that has that carport as well and kind of a brick home.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, price wise, yeah, that's about a $50,000 difference in price here. At
Yeah.
least, yeah, at least between how they're valued at their 40 to 50,000. This house though represents a pretty good opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they paid up for it a little bit there at the auction, but this would, I mean, you're picking it up for 32 grand. Let's say you put another 12, 15 grand into it. You still got a huge profit margin. Even if you put 20 grand into it, let's say that you're into it 50 grand and it's even worth 120, you're still making $70,000 profit. But I think it could probably be closer to the $150,000 price point, looking at this one that sold just right next to it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at 30,000, you're in a really strong position there because you can't afford to put money into the property to fix it up, or you could sell it just as is and sell it and be profitable as well. You don't wouldn't have to do anything to it necessarily in order to sell it.
Yeah. This next one is this property right here that sold for 2,400, and it's actually this lot right here. It's actually a pretty big lot. It goes all the way to right here at the edge of the house and then goes, to right kind of here. You can look at the county information. They're valued at around 16 grand.
Yeah, that may not be too off either. That might be fairly accurate.
Yeah, it's actually a little higher than that. So you can see it goes right there to that house and almost to that house. So it's a pretty good sized lot. They don't have anything on Redfin as far as the actual value, but they do pull up the lot because it does have a full address. Um, Here's a lot for sale. You know, this
Oh,
one's,
that's half the size though, huh?
yeah, half the size for 25,000. Here's one that's about the same size that's selling for 35,000. And then here's one that was only 5,000 square foot that sold for 45,000 right there. So, what did they pay again? 2,400. I think that it's probably going to be worth 20 to 25 grand. I would imagine that their strategy on it, and if they don't plan on building in it, and there was kind of some evidence that they might be looking at that, they could easily wholesale it for, uh, you know, 15 grand probably pretty quickly and turn around and flip and make some good money on it, or look at maybe going through quiet title.
Well, and that lot is also a really good example of the type of lot that we try to get a lot of our coaching students to pick up as a first deal because it has a limited amount of risk involved with it. It's not purchased for that high of a price, so you're only into it $2,400. But what you get out of it though is a property that you have the potential to sell for, like Steve was saying, upwards of $15,000, $20,000. And so you can immediately turn that money that you had, from 2,000 into 20,000, that you're working with to buy more properties. And you can kind of get into that sweet spot where a lot of these properties are at, where you've got to pay a little bit more. But once you get up into that price range of 40, 50, $60,000, there are some properties with a lot of profitability, built into them and a fewer number of bidders you're competing with directly.
Yeah. This next one is number 506 and 507. Uh, and so this one sold for 720, and then this one sold for 2,000. And what I kind of found interesting is they're actually different investors, but these lots are actually right next to each other. So it's kind of this lot right here and this lot, right here, and then right there. So there's two kind of lots right next to each other. So it's this one and then this one right here.
And those are probably each about 7,000 square feet each.
Let's look again. They're 50 by 140.
Yeah, I'll bet that is. Let's see, I'll tell you.
Let's see if the map will.
50 by 140. Yeah, 7,000 square feet even. So, yeah, combined total there, they're about 15,000 square feet, or roughly a third of an acre.
Yeah. And they're kind of pulling the exact same comps because these lots are pretty close to each other, but I did find this one here that sold for 10,000. This is kind of the cheapest lot that I could find that sold. And then this one here sold for, 17,000. So, picking these lots up for 2,000 on one, 720 on the other. In fact, this guy that they're probably pretty much identical lots probably got a better deal at 720, and I wouldn't be surprised if these two started bidding on them, and then this one just let this one win it because it went above their max bid.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that's
my
probably
guess,
true.
but who knows?
Yeah, it would have been a good idea for one or the other to have bought out or basically outbid the other one.
Yeah,
So
and
they had both of them.
you can see this is definitely a smaller county, but it's still kind of interesting to go through and look at some of them. The next one we'll look at is 518, and it's
For
still
20,
yeah
2,100.
2100. It's actually this home right here.
Oh, we even
Can't
have an image
quite.
of it here.
Yeah, in fact, let me see if I can zoom in.
Yeah, we can kind of see it.
Yeah, so
It's about a 1,200 square foot house.
yeah, yeah, about 1,200 square feet. They're showing it only 29 years old, so it's more modern than I would think it is.
Yeah, that would have had to have meant it was built or effectively built in the 90s.
Yeah,
Of course,
here's
last
kind of
sale date on it was for 1990 for 5,000.
yeah. It looks like it sold twice through the tax sale, but they only ended up paying what do we say on it? 2,100.
Mm-hmm.
They're valuing it at 85,000. One thing I found is interesting. I want to see what land sold. So here was a lot, 1 acre lot that sold for 39,000. That was really close to it. And then I was trying to find, because this is a little bit more rural area. We can kind of look. It's kind of close to this White River. You can see Little Rock right here. So it's kind of over on the right side, but still kind of interesting looking into it. So selling for that cheap. There's 1 acre lot. This little 640 square foot home sold for 145,000. And then, this one here, this 1,200, they don't have any other information besides that, sold for 85,000. So, I mean, if the structure is still there and the county's still showing it having value, of 31,000, for picking it up for a couple of grand, probably not too bad of a deal.
Yeah, at that low of a purchase price, I'm sure that they did pretty well here on it.
And again, this is, a more rural county, but there's quite a few of these kind of auctions that are taking place. And one thing that is nice about a lot of the Arkansas auctions is they'll combine 3 or 4 counties together in one auction. So you can attend one auction and bid in 3 or 4 of these different counties, even if they're a little bit smaller.
Yeah, it's one of the advantages of the Commissioner of State Lands, who holds all of the auctions there for Arkansas. they've done a number of things to try to improve the effectiveness of the sales, and that's one of the things they've done is for every auction date, it tends to involve several different counties, and so there's usually hundreds of properties being offered up through multiple counties that cover a big chunk of the state. And so you can participate in the auctions for several counties with every auction you attend. In fact, if you stay and attend a couple of different sales, you could participate in up to 10 counties with just a couple of different sales with the way they split up their each one of the auctions.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get through a couple of these pretty quickly, and then we'll look at some of the properties that we bought. This one here sold for $2,000. It's this lot right here. You can see that there used to be a structure there, kind of a corner lot. Kind of the county record information on it. Here's the lot. They're valuing it at 30 grand. I think that's probably a little high. Here's one that sold for 15 grand, very similar to the same lot. This looks like a little bit more of a commercial land, even though they just say it's vacant land. This sold for 40. So picking it up for 2 grand, let's say it's worth, 15 to 20. Probably not a bad deal for them as far as another lot.
No, in fact, it's a lot like the other deal that we were looking at there, where they pick it up for $2,000, but in turn, it can turn around and turn into 10 or 15 or 20,000. A similar type of deal like that, where you're picking a property up for a low enough percentage of value that you can turn around and make a profit on it without doing anything.
Yeah, we'll look at one more on this list. This one sold for 8,000. I think this one was probably a pretty good deal.
Yeah,
It looks like
looks
it's
like a
still in
great
pretty
purchase.
looks like it's still in pretty good shape. It's got the carport there, 2-car. It's brick.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about this property that are pretty appealing to us. The age of the property looks like it's about right. Probably a place that was built in the 80s, or early 90s. Um, it's a very simple house. The roof looks like it's still, in decent shape. The house, if it was vacant at this time, it probably hadn't been vacant for that long.
Yeah, yeah, we would definitely get an on-site evaluation, but we like how it looks. Now, in looking into the value, here they're only showing it as 62,000, but they're pulling that off of the assessed value. This is kind of the same property as this one, except for I think that they've, you know, uh, finished off the carport. You look at it, kind of the same design. And some of these are kind of within the same little town, so we're kind of looking at some of the same comps. But this was the cheapest home that I could find, and it sold for 75,000. Now it's going to be quite a bit older. Plus, we can see, it's got 2 bedrooms, but you can see, the plumbing system did not hold pressure at the initial winterization, meaning it's got broken pipes. It's been identified, lead-based paint. This is essentially an as-is deal, and they sold it for 75,000. So regardless of how you look at it, that one picked up for 8 grand, and that's another one of the kind of the similar comps within the same area. But
Yeah, I
this
mean,
is kind of the cheapest one.
yeah, I think the one for $8,000, it's $100,000 house all day, all day, and uh, the advantage of that is that they picked it up at a low enough price that they could probably turn around and sell it for a good profit without doing anything to the house, or they could take it through a full rehab, if they wanted as well, and sell it. In either case, they bought it for a low enough price that that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it could work good as a rental too. There's a lot of possibility. But that kind of gives you an idea. And this is kind of probably one of the worst counties that we could look at. But I just kind of picked that first one. Now let's
Yeah,
look into a couple of our properties.
definitely one of the more rural counties, Arkansas County is.
Yeah, yeah. So this one here we picked up for $300 last year. It's this fence lot right here. Here it is on Redfin. They're valuing it around 13,000.
And we love fenced lots.
Yeah.
We love fenced lots, just because the fencing is a type of improvement by itself, but it also increases the usability of the property. This one might even have, I can't tell if it has a concrete pad on it or not. Maybe it's just
There
dirt.
there is right here.
Yeah, there's a concrete pad. Yeah, it's a fairly deep lot, but with the fencing in there, it has additional uses, and so we always like to see fencing there around a property. So yeah, this one we picked up for almost nothing, and it has pretty solid value considering it only costs a couple $100.
Yeah, exactly. $300, has a lot of possibility. These are the kind of properties that you can pick up in some of these on-site auctions where, you can turn around and wholesale it. You could, build on it if it makes sense, or you could, even lease something like this, especially where it's a fence lot like that. This next one is actually kind of interesting because we are selling this property, and this is such an old photo. I was trying to get the new photos that we have on them, but I couldn't find the right file before the podcast tonight. But we ended up picking up this one for $3,700. Here they're not pulling all of the information. In fact, this is kind of a small town outside of the bigger area that we were buying property. And it's because we picked it up, we said we weren't too interested in it, but we said, hey, if we can pick it up for less than 5 grand, it's worth it because it was built in 1985, so it's not that old. But what we ended up doing is that this property was sold at the tax sale, and we were contacted by the previous owner that essentially lost it in the divorce. His wife moved out, and eventually it was in her name. It went to the tax sale. So, in his case, he put us enough down that it's already going to be doubling our money that we put into it, tripling it, I guess I should say. And then we're going to sell it to him for, around 35,000 to $40,000, kind of just working with him now. But that made us our money back. It's getting him back into the property. He's picking it up for a discount. And the actual market value, if it was rehabbed, would probably be about 120.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal for everybody all around.
Yeah, in fact, this little town is where the man in black, I don't know why I'm blanking his name, a country singer. Oh,
Oh, you're talking Johnny Cash?
Johnny Cash. I don't know why I know Johnny Cash. Yeah, Johnny Cash is. This is where his home. This is the town he grew up in, or is born and raised in.
Interesting.
But that's a deal where we put it back into the previous owner's hands. They're picking it up for cheap. We're making money on it, and they're able to essentially live it. In fact, half of the property had a squatter in there as well, so that he's able to deal with that. And this home right here, we ended up picking up for 8,000. And I wish I had our current photos. This one we're actually in the process of doing a light rehab on it as well. Redfin is only valuing it at 55,000, but here's a property that was close by, valued at 139,000. We're valuing this at about 110 to 120. And we'll probably put about $10,000 into it. So by the time we quiet title, we'll be into it at about 20 grand, and we'll sell it between 110 to 120.
Yeah, it's another pretty good property.
Yeah, this is one that we're doing a full rehab on. It's a big 2-story home. They're under assessing it as well. What happens is when these properties go through the tax sale and sell for so much cheaper, we paid $20,000 for this. It adjusts the Redfin values on them. And so that's part of the reason when you're looking at tax sale properties that hasn't been refixed or resold, we'll sometimes see a lower value because they're basing the value off of the fact that we bought it last year for 20 grand.
Yeah, it automatically brings down the price.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So with this home, we're actually going through and doing a full rehab on it. Here's one that sold for $215. That is actually smaller, a little bit different style, but very, very close to it. Here's another home that sold for $290, about the same size, a little bit different style, but kind of the same thing that we're going to be doing on this home. So once we're done with this, it'll probably be worth about $250 to $270. We're going to have to put some money into rehabbing it, but still there'll probably be over between $100,000 to $150,000 profit on it.
It's funny, this market, it's one of the more, like, it's a little bit rural, for Little Rock area. It seems like it takes a little while to get there. Was an hour away.
Yeah, yeah. It's a decent sized town. There's some things going on, a new steel mill going in within the area. So, there's plenty of growth and opportunity even in a smaller market like this. We actually picked up this animal clinic for $6,000 at the tax sale. And one thing that's kind of interesting is it's actually, even though it's been vacant for a long time, somebody has been maintaining it. And we are going to, if we were going to keep it and not just sell it, we would be redoing the roof. But it's actually dry inside. It's well kept up. We picked it up to $6,000. This is actually all changed, and this has been all redone. They have a car dealership right here. So we're probably going to be selling it to this, you can see that this is back in 2024. So we're going to be selling it to these guys probably for about 120 to 150. We're just negotiating with them now. You can see it's right here on the main road, right next to the Yamaha dealership.
Yeah, sometimes commercial properties can be good little deals, that come up because, sometimes they don't get the same kind of competition that your single family homes will. People aren't really sure what to bid on them. And in our case, we may not know the exact value of the property of the commercial property. In fact, with commercial properties, it's a little bit trickier trying to figure out the exact value. That's where we tend to lean more on the county's assessed value on it. And we kind of decide if we can get the property for below X amount, then we would move forward with it. And that's kind of what happened with this one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, it's going to be a good profitable deal for us. This one here is kind of an interesting property because it's actually used to be a more mortuary. And it includes kind of this big lot right here, this area. And what happened is that the person that owned this ended up dying a couple of years ago and didn't have any heirs or estate and ended up going to the tax sale. And we were actually contacted before we put it on the market by a nice old couple that she used to be the funeral director for this property. In fact, this funeral business had a couple of different funeral homes in kind of this area, one in Louisiana as well. And so her and her husband, they're on Social Security, and the husband's a vet. And so we're actually going to be selling it we're actually renting into it now because she still had the keys and everything, and she's going to be running the business and have it be her business now. We're renting it to them for the next 6 months, and then they're going to buy it from us for 150,000, which is still going to probably be about 40% off for them. So it's going to be a good deal for them. We want to do right by them, but it's also going to be able to, where we picked it up for 6,000, we're going to have to, the only thing we're going to do is clean the title and then sell it to them for 150.
It's surprising how often when you acquire properties like these that you'll get contacted by potential buyers or by people that are looking, that are interested and that are looking for information about your property and to buy. A lot of times there's people lining up to buy the properties that you pick up.